It is wonderful to see all of you here today to join me for crafting winning proposals from idea to submission. My name is Ed Buchanan. I am a presenter, and I spend a lot of my time thinking of ways to take ideas and concepts that I have experience with and put them in front of other people. I have a list of some of my conference presentations and other big events on the screen for you to kind of look at. You'll notice that there are two clusters. There's 2019 and 2024 here. There was something that happened in between there that made conferences shut down. We won't get into that today, but it is a history lesson if you want to go look for it. What are we here to do? Well, we're here to talk about how you get yourself into a photo like you see on screen. This is a photo that I took right in front of the presenter's window, essentially for my session at NACE. So that was back in June in Arizona. Hopefully you're here because you have something to say. And that something to say doesn't have to be revolutionary. It doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. Your lens is your power. So the way you see the world, the way you interact with your specialty, with the information you know, with the things that you are good at to excel at, those are the types of things that you would explore for this type of presentation or this type of proposal. I will tell you that two core concepts of things that we're going to talk about today are that stories sell and that specifics win. As you put together your thoughts, as you're trying to think through how do I relate what I know or what I'm good at to other people, it's really looking at what types of stories can I use to humanize what I'm talking about? And what are the specifics that make my lens important, that make my perspective important? Everyone here, your voice has power, but only you can say what you can say. Let's talk now about somewhere to say it. What you see on screen right now is really just a collection of some of the conferences that are in this education space, this lane. OLC, they have two conferences. They have a spring conference, Innovate, and a fall conference, Accelerate. You'll see Middle States there below that. To the left of that is NACE, the National Association of Collegiate Employers. All of these are conferences that are in our space, so to speak, in this higher learning space. Some of them also go K-12 and some of them go throughout employer learning and other pieces. But generally speaking, these are some places that you can start to look if you don't have a conference in mind or you don't really have a background on this. You want to carefully evaluate before you submit or before you attend a conference. I have 3 A's that will help you figure that out. There's applicable, accessible, and advantageous. First, applicable. Does the conference apply to you in some way? These are all kind of teaching conferences or aligned to education, so by default, they are in that space. But applicable also means, does it connect with you, your values, what your particular take is on subjects? These are other things to consider when you're thinking about applicable. Next is accessible, and this one is probably the most important because you don't want to go through the process, putting a proposal together, sending it in, and getting an acceptance and going, oh, I can't make that. Accessible means not only you can attend it live if it's a live conference, but if it's a virtual conference, it doesn't fall on a day you're not available. It doesn't fall in a timeline or time frame you're not available. The last thing you want to do is probably get accepted to speak at a prestigious university in India and find out that, oh yeah, I can't travel there. I'm not going to be able to afford that. Or in other instances, my company's not going to pay for me to do that, so I'm not going to do that. The third A is advantageous. Is it advantageous for you to not only attend, but also to speak at that conference? Both of those things are important. Sometimes I've been to a number of conferences where I've just been an attendee and it's been great and I've had great value from it. In other instances, I've been to conferences and I'm kind of waiting for the conference to get over because I'm ready to travel home because, well, it wasn't as applicable as I hoped. If you do this research up front, you really look into the conferences before you approach them and before you put the proposal together, you're really in a good space there. What we're going to do is we're going to do a dissection of a call for proposal, a CFP. And if you never heard of that CFP term before, that's what it is, call for proposal. And what this is usually a conference or an event, and they are looking for folks to come and speak at their event. We are going to specifically dissect the OLC Accelerate 2025. What you do see on screen are some of the resources that, for instance, OLC, this organization, provides. So here's a proposal planning template. There's information from their presenter services on writing effective abstracts and proposals. This is all great when you have a fresh take or an unusual pairing, you have a personal story, and you've got lived experiences, and you're ready to put the proposal together, and you found this place. I will tell you that they don't put these resources out there for their own enjoyment. These are provided for a very specific reason. They are telling you right here on these pages how to get accepted to speak at their conference. It is essential that you read, understand, and are ready to make your proposal meet these requirements. They are telling you how to get accepted. All you have to do is follow the path. Let's look at what happens when you follow the path to their proposals website. This is literally a screenshot directly off of OLC's proposals website. They are going to tell you the important dates, the track descriptions, which we'll go through in a minute, the session types, and then give you frequently asked questions for submitters, frequently asked questions for presenters, and then where to go for general questions. This is a very well laid out proposal site. I've come across some of them that are, you have to dig for about 10 minutes to find any of this information. OLC does a really nice job of just putting all this together. The important thing, again, to note here is that all of this information is important for you as you start to think about how to package that idea that we had a moment ago. Let's talk about our tracks. Really what they are is just groupings of like concepts so that people who are attending the conference know, oh, I'm in learning design. Which one? Okay, track number one. Things that are marked track number one for me are going to be probably good places for me to go. They're extremely helpful for folks who are especially new to a conference. They're also helpful for you to help figuring out who your audience is going to be. Just a high-level overview here. You're going to choose your track, and then you're going to revise the language of your proposal to match that track as best as you can. It is best to pick a track and not try and do track 2 and 3 at the same time, for instance. The better you can kind of personalize it to that particular track, the higher the likelihood that you're going to get accepted. So just looking at OLC's tracks, track 1, innovative and effective digital learning design, design better online learning, use tools like AI, VR, gamification, focus on engagement, accessibility, and future-ready skills. That's what track 1 is. Track 2, leadership, partnerships, organizational strategy. Lead change, build partnerships, align your digital tools to these big picture goals. And then this is ideal for like decision makers and folks that are innovators. This entire organization prides itself on being innovators, so something to think about. Track number 3, learner success, engagement, empowerment. This is all about supporting students, whether it's through advising, inclusion, mental health, career readiness. It's centered on connection and outcomes. And then track number 4, professional development, quality assurance, and support. This is really where you have a concept that's going to help educators grow. You're interested in something that is skills-based. You're interested in something that is focused on growing the instructor as a person and as a professional. This is where you would want to track that in. Session types. Every conference has a set of different types of sessions that they offer or that they lean towards. For instance, OLCs, you see them on screen. There's 8 of them here. There's really, for our purposes, only 7 because one of them is on graduate students, and we are not graduate students necessarily for the purposes of what we're talking about. Some of you are graduate students. You might want to explore that. I'm not. We're going to skip that one. The session types you see, conversation, not presentation. This is literally, there's no slides. This is just a discussion. You bring a big idea, you put it on the table, and you guide participants through some guided questions and some discussion. It's all about dialogue and shared thinking. Session number 2 is a discovery session. This is like a poster session. You have a laptop, you have a poster on screen. You kind of give the same roughly 5 to 7 minute presentation multiple times as people go through sessions or through stations around the room. So it's a 45-minute session, but you basically present it about 8 times, essentially, to different groups of people. Session 3 is the one we're skipping. Session 4, education session. This is a traditional kind of conference presentation when you think about the structure. So it's either a panel, a presentation, an interview. This is where you are presenting oftentimes a slide deck or something similar, and you're sharing insights, telling stories, and really kind of inviting discussion, typically through a Q&A or other kind of innovation. Engagement activity. This one is kind of one of those creative sessions that breaks the mold. Oftentimes, these are things like mindfulness activities, or they go alternative pathways in terms of the way the session is structured. They're about 45 minutes for OLC. They are interesting from the standpoint of I was involved in one where they handed us children's instruments, like those little kazoos and all kinds of things like that, like you see on Jimmy Fallon. And we worked together to create a song. And that was a session on obviously collaboration. An express session, this is like a TED Talk, 15 minutes. Usually there's 3 of them grouped together. This is the one that I participated in the fall at OLC Accelerate last year. Gamified session, this is what it sounds like. The gamified session, you get together, you play the game, you hopefully learn to emulate the game. And then workshop, that's just a longer session where you typically have a presentation or presentations, and then you break folks up into groups, and they work on their own mini presentations to give throughout that time as well. You've got a concept. You've got a track. You've got a session type. Now we're going to talk about actually writing the proposal. But before we write a single word of the proposal, I'm going to give you, hopefully, the easiest advice that I can about how to get this through that group that's going to be gatekeeping and get that invite to speak. Sell it. Your proposal is 1 part sales, 1 part marketing, 1 part information. So we've got a 3-part piece there. What you write in your proposal matters. That is what the folks that are evaluating for presenting at the conference are looking at. If you are accepted, that will oftentimes transfer into their app, into their guide for the conference, and that is exactly what people are going to be looking at when they decide whether or not to attend your session. What you write matters. The first thing on the list is audience. We know that we have a track and we have a format, so we have a little bit of our audience defined. But one of the things that you want to do is be very clear about who your audience is and who's going to benefit. The worst thing you can do is open up your panel or your presentation and figure out that you are presenting to a room of instructional designers, because that's the way you wrote it, but you are really thinking about presenting to faculty. Wholly different audience. The next is realistic outcomes. Depending on your session type, you only have a limited amount of time. If you plan out a 4-hour session, that's great. If you only have 45 minutes, that's not great. If you have a 45-minute session, but you only plan 15 minutes for like a TED Talk, also not great. Make sure that your outcomes match the appropriate length of what you're trying to present. Next, what are your stories? This is the 3rd time I've told you the stories sell. Make sure that you have stories that are relatable and that connect to what you're trying to do. Don't have a story about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich if you're sitting there trying to talk to people about career readiness. Instead, make sure that you talk about that time when you were in high school, you worked at Subway, and you learned business practices from that. And as a result, you're now better equipped to help other people with their career readiness. Titles. Let me give you a pro tip. Your title is going to be the first thing that people look at and either pick whether or not to look further or just move on. A good title is important. And I will tell you that for conferences that alphabetize their sessions by their times, the earlier in the alphabet you are, the better chance you have of getting higher attendance at your session. For those conferences that just go by room by the time, that's not as relevant. But if your conference alphabetizes, having an ABC title is going to greatly increase your chances of getting folks to attend. Sorry, sad but true. The last thing I'll talk about is clear, concise, and focused. If you take nothing else from this, when writing a proposal, make sure you are clear, you don't overuse words, you're as concise as you can be, and that you're focused on what you're trying to accomplish. If you go off in other directions, you will quickly find yourself in the reject pile. It's just a reality. It is not a comment on you as a person. It is a comment on the proposal that you put forth. The last thing that we're going to dive into today as it relates to putting a proposal together, many different conferences go about this in different ways. Sometimes they'll call it a summary and content. Sometimes they'll say short abstract and extended abstract, which is what OLC does. NACE only had one abstract, and for that one was the extended one. Your abstracts may vary, but usually they're going to accomplish the two things that you see on screen. The short one is the marketing one. It's the one that shows up in their app right underneath your title. And it's the one that hopefully gets people to click and figure out more about your session. The extended one is the one that go through clarity, the outcomes, the interactivity. Most importantly, it should be anonymous, and it should be, you should strip out any of your identifying characteristics if you want your proposal to go forward. The reason being, if a group is looking at it and says, oh, they refer to themselves Dr. Williams, Dr. Williams, Dr. Williams. I know this is Dr. Williams's proposal. We can't have that in a double blind proposal session. If you are putting your extended abstract together, try and make it as anonymous as possible. Let's connect. If you have questions about this, feel free, you can reach out to me. I always include a slide like this in every one of my presentations, whether it be on ground, in person, or virtually. This is really helpful for networking too. If I'm going to a conference in person, I always print this out and put it on the underside of my badge so that as I meet people and they're like, oh, do you have a card? I just flip this over and they scan it. It's much better than a card from that perspective, just from a standpoint, it's easier for me to keep track of things.